This video is not suitable for audiences under 13 years of age.
Kill. Double kill. Triple kill. Titan Slayer. Godlike.
Hello everyone, Mixfant Gaming here. Welcome to my channel. Today we're taking a look at the dev stream that happened today. It really wasn't a dev stream. It was a discussion with one of the developers on Discord. So I took the time today to go through all the comments, all the questions, the items that they mentioned and talked about, and I put it all together here into some PowerPoint slides. I wanted to kind of summarize everything and give it to the people that couldn't attend the Discord discussion. Now to start with, I'm just going to mention right now, there is a lot of content that they covered. Most of it was concept ideas about bots that people had submitted, and they also went over some Q&A. So if you look in the description below, I have a couple of timestamps. If you're interested in the concept ideas, you can go straight to there. If you're interested only in the question and answer portion, you can go there. Or if you want to watch the entire video, that's perfectly fine as well. Anyways, to give a brief overview of the whole idea about this Discord discussion, it was interesting, but I found it wasn't very efficient either. And the mechanism behind the scenes was people had ahead of time submitted some concept ideas, and one of the developers was going to go over them, give them their thoughts and views, etc. And the community could also participate a little bit. However, the flow between things was, I don't say chaotic, but they were jumping around various spots. If you're familiar with Discord, it has various channels you can use. And even going into this, I had no idea where this channel was supposed to be on their official Discord server. And the way it turned out that they operated it is just before the event started, they created a brand new channel. And then you went into that channel and you could start to converse with the developers and the moderators. But not only that, they created another, I think 2 other channels. And throughout the whole discussion, they seemed to jump between one channel to another. And I understand the concept of it. They wanted to keep the flow of information associated with a channel. So for instance, one channel was dedicated to the concept ideas. Another channel was dedicated to just the Q&A portion. But what they did was they started off with the concept ideas, then they went to some Q&A, then they went back to the concept and back and forth, etc. So unless you were actively involved in reading it and keeping up to date, you had no idea exactly what channel they were in at any one point in time. Also, on top of that, there was actually quite a large time span in between having a question asked or the concept idea being submitted for discussion from them actually responding to it. And I think part of the mechanism about this and reason for it is the developer behind the scenes, from my understanding, from what I gathered in a little bit of discussion, was not very strong in English. So what had happened was the questions were submitted, they were reviewed, they were translated to him, he responded in Russian, then they're retranslated back into English and then put in. There was very often times where a topic had come up for discussion or a question, and it would take 10 or 15 minutes before a response actually ended up in Discord, which I thought was not very efficient and it didn't actually help the flow of the conversation. That being said, let's hop into here and see what we can come up with about some of the items that they had indicated during this discussion. So as we're going to look here, the first part here is going to be concept ideas, and then the last portion we're going to go over all the questions and answers that they provided. So the first one here, they're talking about a bot called Overlord. And the submission was that the Overlord is a quad-legged robot, much like the Raker and the Fujin in size, and is meant to be a brawler. What makes the Overlord special is that it has 8 minions. The minions are a much smaller version of the Overlord. The Overlord has a spawner on the back, which spawns the new minions every few seconds. The minions have a small kinetic gun that shoots up to 500 meters, and the Overlord itself has 2 mediums. The Overlord is a fast bot at 60 kilometers per hour, but the minions are much faster. This bot is consistently spawning minions until it has reached 8 of them on the battlefield, and the minions are very fragile and weak on their own. But when all 8 of them are working together against one enemy, it destroys. So the ability is called Focus, and the Focus mode allows the Overlord to control its minions. By default, when it's not in this mode, the minions are free to move around by themselves and shooting at their own will. However, when in Focus mode, the minions follow the Overlord and shoot at whatever the Overlord is shooting at. All the minions stay only within 100 meters of the Overlord. So the response from the developers: wow, what a fresh approach. The concept is really nice, but they can see two issues that would have to be kept in mind if it was ever to be decided to implement. The targeting system, for one, several smaller bots dangling after a bigger one would drive the system crazy. And we all know the issue with their targeting system right now. In an ideal scenario, the health characteristic of these minions should be replaced by a limited lifespan. For example, their lifespan could depend on ability charges. So say the robot has 8 ability charges. Each time it activates its ability, a minion spawns, which will remain active only until its first charge is recharged. The second issue they have is that they haven't taught their servers to interact with 3 parties at the same time. So you'd have the player, the player's teammates and opponents, as well as the AI control of the actual minions, all within one battle scene. Now that might change, of course, once they implement drones, because drones is pretty much kind of the same sort of situation. However, the key here is that they still haven't trained the system. So if they adjust the concept to avoid that first issue and get the infrastructure ready to deal with the second one, then the Overlord could become a perfect fun bot. The second one they submitted here was the one called Bulldozer. The weapons, it has 1 heavy, 1 medium, 1 light, with a health of about 350,000 HP at maxed, and a speed of 45 kilometers per hour. It has a shield, a strong physical shield with both front and sides, and its special ability is called Force Shove and accelerates 50% when used. So the front shield curves so that it can scoop and trap enemy bots. It's kind of like if you picture a bulldozer. With its physical shields, it can walk into occupied beacons, then shove enemy bots out of the way or off beacons or into acid pools. For instance, a factory or off of a ravine in the castle map. The ability is called Force Shove. This is similar to a dash. Its ability that depletes while used. When fully charged, it has 1 to 4 seconds of shove ability. You must hold down the button to use it, and it recharges automatically. So when pushing a bot over the cliff, you can stop just before you go over yourself. But especially useful for trying to push bots off of beacons. And to counter this bot, they suggest that you can try to dodge a charging bulldozer if you see it coming. Phantoms and scorpions can teleport if they get shoved, and rockets can be used to mitigate the physical shields. Now, the response from the developers is, I believe that one of the game designers was working on something very similar. They had to scratch the idea because the game was very sensitive to situations where one player can change the position of another player on the map. Back then, such scenarios usually led to synchronization failures. You would clearly see that you're pushing the robot back, but the player on the other end would see that the robot remains in place. It's not really that much of a problem now, as we already have an Arthur's Blast Wave, which basically does the same sort of situation. This concept is an interesting run. If they had to pick faults, they suggested that the physical interaction for something like the Blast Wave be switched to. The robot generates a concussion wave while running and scatters all enemy bots around it. This way you wouldn't have to worry about wasting the ability. And what's important, because some players avoid items that are difficult to use. War Robots is what they call a mid-core mobile game, not a hardcore one. And they always have to keep that in mind. The next robot submission here was something called the Magi. And the Magi would be a bipedal robot, like all the other robots, so it's 2-legged. And it would be plantigrade. In other words, it would walk like a normal human being, like its leg joints are. Whereas the robots for right now, you can see the joints are actually reversed from a human. It would be a medium in size, around the size of a Tyr and Ares. It would be in the DSC faction, and so it should share the simple, rugged aesthetics of other robots of that faction, like the Behemoth. Its weapon hardpoints should be distributed in a symmetrical fashion to the hull, with at least a weapon on each side of the torso. The Magi is a new breed of support bots. It should have a medium firepower of 4 light weapons, or 2 mediums and 1 light, and the speed around 50 to 55 kilometers per hour, but fairly high durability with 250,000 to 300,000 hit points at Mark II level 12. Like other support bots, its main appeal is to players who are team-oriented. Unlike current support bots, however, it helps the team winning by buffing the other team members instead of repairing their robots. The Magi's ability is called the Resistance Projection. When activated, the ability increases the defense points of all robots within the radius of effect, somewhere between 75 to 100 meters around the robot. So think of something like a Mender where they have to get, or a Tier where they have to get in a certain range of its teammates to heal them. This one will operate in the same sort of situation, except you get resistance projection. Once activated, the friendly do not need to stay close to the Magi to retain the bonus defense points. So unlike with the Mender or the Tier that you have to be in that circle and stay there to get healed over a certain amount of time, more specifically the Mender, once they gain this bonus, this resistance projection, they can go outside the circle and still maintain it for a certain amount of time. So the points gained depends on the level of the Magi, so starting at 25 for Mark 1 level 1, going up to 50 for Mark 2 level 12. And its cooldown is 15 to 17 seconds. So the best way they say to counter this robot would be to focus on its destruction first before engaging other robots, as it is supporting, as this will make it easier to do so once it is destroyed. If possible, opposing robots should try to time their attack during the cooldown of the resistance projection to have an easier time taking down the beefy robot. So the developers have responded with, they've already been thinking for quite some time for that while our support robots could use some new perks. Repairing allies is a must-have for the basics, but there are other ways to bolster your team. A robot that can strengthen allies temporarily would be a great choice. Unfortunately, the game lacks the functionality to implement robot-to-robot bonuses. But sooner or later, their coders will get to that part. So it's a thought-out and reliable concept. It's very likely that the support role in more robots will develop into something like this in the future. And just for your information, they happen to go in a little bit more detail, and they gave us the current resistance formula that is currently in use. So I won't go to the math of it here, but it's basically the percentage of resistance equals 1 subtract 100 divided by 100 plus X, where X is the amount of defense points. And it actually is kind of an interesting formula if you actually think about it and go through the math, but I won't do that here in this video. Next one here we have called the Blackout. The Blackout is a tank designated to take out powerful enemies by ambush, using its armored shells to block off direct hits and its thick legs to help the robot get across cover in time before taking catastrophic blows. It's intimidating, shrink down tough opponents. Anyways, there's a big ramble here. The big thing we should know out here is it has an EMP. And the EMP has a range of 300 meters. And if you know what EMPs are, it's electromagnetic pulse, and it can actually temporarily disable robots. So essentially the way it works here is how they want to counter it is the Blackout's toughest and roughest armor are located in the front of the robot, which means its weakest points behind, like an Arthur or a Lancelot. If lucky enough to close in, players would have to hit the back to inflict the heaviest amount of damage they could on the Blackout, but would have to do it quickly since the grid lock ability takes only 20 seconds to shut them off again. Blackout's speed is only 30 kilometers per hour, makes it very slow, and leaving its target's time to escape from its grasp. Speed, best strength sometimes. Not sure. I guess you're trying to say the speed is one of the best counters for it. If players can damage the Blackout's back large enough, the EMP breaks off. leaving the dangerous enemy a vulnerable, a vulnerable snack. So the Blackout's HP from base level, they say, is 168 hit points, and it doesn't have any damage resistance. So if we look at the top here, it says the ability is known as the EMP. It's designed to shut off intruders from certain distances and leave them defenseless for a period of time. So it emits a blue electromagnetic field that spreads out, touching enemies and turning them off. So that means they can't move, they can't fight, they can't even turn their abilities on and off. Essentially, they're basically making robots sitting ducks for 6 seconds. They wanted to make a reminder here that the EMP can also disable stealth robots within 300 meters range and turn off their stealth. So essentially what they're saying here is any active ability that is currently running gets disabled by the EMP pulse. So basically say you have to be careful, and it says Titans can also be affected. Physical shields turn on. Titans can also be affected. By the way, physical shields turn on are still working under effect. Okay, so if you have to be using a physical shield on your bot, it's still effective to any incoming damage, because it says the energy shields will, but the energy shields themselves will turn off. Even the absorption shield. So the Aegis shield, the absorption shield, the Ansel shield, all shields, energy shields turn off. So as for maintenance of the ability, it's just a one click of the button. And everything is taken out into account automatically. It's 20 seconds from eating your meals and surviving long enough to inject a non-massive blow. So the cooldown is 20 seconds. Oh, and of course, they want to mention one more nasty thing you should notice. Active modules of a victim are deactivated, and pilot skills can't save the robot from being hit from the blackout. So the developer's response says, well, that's a monster of a robot, and that's coming from the person who worked on the Scorpion, the Leech, the June, and the Ravana. So anyways, jokes aside, despite all the effort that the author went in to balance it out, they still have lots of second thoughts about adding this robot into the game. The key reason here is an unspoken rule which all robot game designers follow, and that is we are making a game and we can't take away the ability to play it. Put bluntly, a player should never lose control over the situation entirely. We assume that your robot can be rooted, suppressed, frozen, or inflicted damage over time, but you can still control your robot and have a chance to overcome your opponent, even though the chance might be minimal. It's a solid concept, and it could be revisited to fulfill the above rule. Next one we have is called the Morpheus. And so it's, I won't go the kind of the description they put in here, but it essentially says the bot can lock down and put the enemy to sleep from anywhere within range. So to me, this kind of fits in with the same EMP discussion we had previously. The appearance is a dark blue and gray medium robot with one medium weapon and 2 lights. It's a very fast and agile robot, much like a glass cannon. It doesn't have much durability, but when using the ability, it can be used to easily surprise and attack enemies at close range. It's a fire and forget robot. With its ability called Silencer, it can render the enemy ability useless, and they won't be able to move, which gives the perfect moment to swiftly strike and kill. Without its ability, it becomes very vulnerable. The bot can be used carefully with patience to use cover all the time. An efficient way is to have 2 teammates both use Morpheus at the same time, one with a legendary pilot and one without. And you'll see why they say that in a little bit later. So the stats are 120,000 health at level 1 and 50 kilometers per hour in speed. So it says the bot is vulnerable to attacks and becomes quite useless without its ability. The best way to kill it is to attack it when it doesn't have its ability, and the cooldown is 15 seconds. The Silencer ability, the enemy Morpheus targets and uses its ability on enemies within a 200 meter range. They can get locked down, and disables their ability for 5 seconds. When the ability is active, Morpheus gains a 20% extra speed boost and a 20% durability boost and a 20% damage boost. The legendary pilot for it, they call it, is Ryan Harding. It changes the Morpheus ability by replacing lockdown with suppression. So this is where you get a discussion of having two Morpheus pilots, one with regular and one without. So if you had two Morpheus bots on the field, one can lock down and one can suppress. So what if the enemy robot has their ability active when Morpheus uses its own ability? Then the enemy robot ability is canceled. So if a leech is using its ability, then the Morpheus will cancel its ability and the leech ability will go back to its cooldown. And then they say, what if the enemy is already locked down and the Morpheus uses its ability? It will essentially reset the timer. So if their timer for the lockdown was at 4 seconds and we're just about to go out, then it would reset to still another 5 seconds left. And the same thing goes if a second Morpheus uses their ability, it essentially resets the timer yet again. Now, the dev's response is it was a very interesting concept, and it has potential in theory. This robot could be a constant anti-meta bot. No matter how powerful your opponent might be, with proper timing, you could always lock their ability and afflict root. Sounds like a problem to every single robot in the game, but who knows, maybe one day we'll add this meta nullifier to the game. One special point to note, every ability in the game now has states. When you activate an ability, it starts running through several different states or conditions, if you like. How the state changes depends on its design, but the states hold every information about the ability, from sound and visual effects to the ability to core functions, for example, impulses that make your robot jump. If you interrupt the ability before it gets to the final state, which is usually its cooldown, you will also cancel all sound and visual effects as well as ability animation. In 90% of the cases, that'd look horrible. The robots would stutter and look unnatural, and if a robot can look natural at all. So the game designer who will work on such a bot will have to deal with these issues first. And personally speaking, I don't think it's a huge issue because we already have several robots in the game that have the ability to cancel their built-in active ability. Think of any of the flying bots, the Aojun, the Aokin, the Aoguang. You can land them at any point in time you want. Same thing with the Nightingale. Look at things like the Invader and the Mercury. While you're in mid jump, you can press your button again to basically land at any one point in time. You don't have to necessarily wait for the entire duration of the cooldown before it would land. So while I understand where they're coming from with this comment, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Now, I'm not saying I agree with these bots, but that was just my thought of that one particular comment they made. So this other one here is called the Morta. Excuse me. So its ability is called Wither. Since Morta belongs to the Minds of Icarus technology, it is expected to use minor teleportation technology. Upon activation of Wither, Morta will teleport a corrosive canister to a desired target. All other enemies within the range of the canister will take heavy corrosive damage, but the duration will be much less. 1 tick of corrosion will be added to the surrounding enemies every second. Canister duration is 10 seconds, reduced by 2 seconds for every additional enemy. So the description, okay, we don't really need to go through the whole description of what it is, but they do mention here that it's a high-powered support robot as well as a leech, and possibly even a Titan killer. Set with very similar hardpoint setups to a Blitz, the Morta would actually be able to support 4 EQ shields at one time. Now, why are they getting into cost? That would be $75 US. I don't understand. But anyways, the recommended equipment is 4 Hussar, 4 Cryo, and 4, I don't even know what Kalidi is. Must be a translation error. And for legendary pilots, it looks like they have 2 legendary pilots. One, the corrosion canister lasts 50% longer, with a 50% reduction on the release of delay. And the second one is the corrosion canister gains the ability to lock down robots, 250% effect accumulation, for a 65% decrease in corrosive power. So their response, first off, it was good to know that somebody likes damage over time mechanics. It says Morta is a perfect example of where teleportation mechanics might go next. To teleport a damaged zone instead of the robot itself is a smart solution. There will be a problem, of course, of indicating where exactly the canister should teleport when you press the button, but it could be addressed. We also want to point out that Morta has no built-in defense solutions, which makes it vulnerable at short distances. Most likely it would encourage players to equip sniper or semi-sniper weapons in the range of 600 to 1100 meters. The most effective sniper weapons come with a heavy slot, and the heavy range has more options for sniper camper playstyle, and its sniper weapons usually have more power than their alternatives for medium and light weapons. So here the developer is recommending considering changing the setup instead to a heavy and medium light slots combined. So next one here is called Yazaemon. Sorry, I didn't look at how to pronounce that properly. It's apparently taken from Kido Yazaemon, which is a ninja warrior that used fire techniques to assassinate enemies. So it's a small bot around the size of Blitz or Phantom. It's two-legged and has an X on the back that sticks to the corners. Imagine cross katanas that a ninja would have on his back, so he can draw them out with each wand. So the fighting style is the speed and lower durability are key factors. Base health is around 85,000. Base speed is at 48 kilometers per hour. Has two medium weapon slots, and as mentioned, provide the firepower. This is an ambush bot intended to sneak up, unload weapons, and run away, or assist squad mates in setting a perimeter to help protect vital areas. A jump module with this bot would be a great addition if it can be built into the game controls. So the special ability is, think of a ninja where it's stealth. There are two unique abilities that give the bot a fighting chance on the battlefield. The bot can trigger a limited duration phase shift. This is not an on-off switch like the Loki with stealth. It can be triggered and lasts up to 7 seconds. In my personal opinion, 7 seconds for a phase shift is absolutely ludicrous, but that's just my own opinion. It allows the bot to move quickly in and out of areas without being targeted. The bot can trigger with 2 taps, one to initiate and one to set a booby trap line that extends between 2 points of a straight line. So in other words, think of a trip mine or tripwire. You have to set 2 areas of the start and end point, and then there is this imaginary tripwire line going between the two. When an enemy crosses that line, the tripwire and anything between the 2 points receives 20,000 damage, or whatever the designers determine is appropriate for the game balance. Damage occurs in the same way an Arthur Blast Wave is done, whereas it ignores Aegis shields. Only one trap can be set at a time. A new trap cannot be set until the first one is tripped. It says conceivably you could actually do this in the air and be able to set a trap so that somebody flying can actually trigger it. It says the trap is not visible to an enemy, but it can be seen by your squad mates. So kind of like the teleportation beacons that the Phantom and the Scorpion use. So the trap can be laid out in spaces that the team is trying to protect. And this special ability will give pilots an opportunity to experiment with maps anew, thereby refreshing the game experience. This ability also allows for flexibility when planning a legendary pilot skill. Legendary pilot can add the ability to trigger the use of a second trap, remove and reset a single trap, or extend the phase shift mode, for example. Counterplay, low armor may necessitate the use of anti-control to avoid lockdown. Anyone who tries to stand and fight with this bot will likely lose. Much like the Nightingale, with 2 medium and 1 light weapon slot, the pilot will need to be careful in deciding when to unload the weapons and then activate the phase shift. The new Scorpion bot will be able to jump in and out of protected areas. The Ravana can run through the booby trap and trigger it without damage if they're in its dash ability. So it's Transcendence mode. So the dev's response is, wow, that was a feat of creativity, nicely done. They especially like the idea about the jump unit and the trap for flying robots. But they have to admit straight up that this concept would be more than difficult to implement as it has too many mechanics. But it doesn't make the concept less brilliant and fun. So a couple words about the implementation problems. Such abilities are not typical to the game. We'd have to revise the whole ability system. We could either add a second ability like the Titans or develop a new activation conditions so that one ability could fulfill two completely different purposes. In terms of game mechanics, the behavior of the booby trap is a complex thing. Rounding corners and obstacles, setting a trap between 2 points at different heights. These are all dangerous corner cases. We cannot afford the time required to implement them in a fail-proof fashion. And there's one more thing I want to point out, because it conflicts with yet another one of the unspoken rules. When creating content, make sure its behavior is predictable. When you play war robots, you don't always see your opponents. They might be on the other side of the map or covering behind buildings. They do their best to give players the feel of a tactical genius. Each robot has features that help you understand what it is even without seeing its model. For example, you can tell it's a Ravana if you notice a short time acceleration and transparent health bars. You know it's a Scorpion preparing to attack when you see the resistance icon popping above the robot, which was just sitting in place for quite some time. Getting these clues allows you to decide a course of action even before the enemy engages you directly. That's why they wouldn't recommend making Yazaemon's traps invisible. If they are slightly visible, careful players will have a chance to spot them and decide what to do, and it makes for better gameplay. Next one is the Kodainoken. Sorry if I can't pronounce that properly either, but it's a translation of Japanese meaning ancient sword. Level 9 stats, 200,000 health, 70 kilometers per hour. The pulverize ability. The robot dashes forward 30 meters to close in on enemies while starting its 4-sword system. After the dash, the robot initializes the sword system and engages with 4 swings, each with a quarter of a second total swing time per sword and half a second time between each swing. So it's essentially a sword-wielding robot that does physical damage directly to another enemy robot. So the ability damage is 20,000 per sword, and the cooldown is 14 seconds. The practical description is a fast, heavy robot with 4 built-in high-damage swords. I won't go through the lore description. You can read it if you want. And the weapon hard points are 3 medium slots, recommended equipment, 3 storm, 3 cryo. And the response. A samurai robot. What could be more hard-boiled and cool? Only a Viking robot stands the chance. It said it's a fine concept and an interesting one, but off the record, the developer personally dreams of creating a swordsman robot. But the complication is that it would encounter the same issues that they were trying to implement. Let me restart that. But there's a complication. The bot would encounter the same complication if we decided to try and implement it. This difficulty is all about the interaction between the sword model and the robot model. So they go about to a little bit more development-focused conversation, in that they say the easiest way to implement sword mechanics would be to allow the sword to run through an enemy robot without encountering pushback. So what they're saying here is everybody would expect the sword to bounce off of the steel hull or get stuck in it, and so that it would take effort to pull it out. And of course, there should be markings or dents on damaged robots. It would look even better if you could strike off steel chunks of enemy robots, but unfortunately, that's not an option. Just as with the Yazaemon project, which is the other bot we talked about previously, it would require too much time. But then they got thinking about it some more, and they said on second thought, well, maybe they added an energy sword. Driving an energy blade through the robot's opponent wouldn't look so bad. Maybe the swordsman robots of the future could have energy blades. And there's only 2 more robots left. So like I warned you, this was going to be a very long video. And this one's called the Hacker. It's a 4-legged, 4 light slot robot, and it's called the Hacker, 60 kilometers per hour. It has a hack ability. It entails shooting an electric charge at an enemy, which disables all functionality, including movement, looking, ability activation, and weapons for 3 to 5 seconds while dealing damage over time. Speed is also boosted. The ability duration is 10 seconds. and can jump from initial target to multiple targets nearby, inflicting the same lockdown effect on them, and maybe up to a maximum of 3. So think of a shock train. The robot possesses a physical shield, which is lowered when the ability is activated, perhaps in trade-off to fire the beam reminiscent of the Blitz opening its mouth. The legendary pilot skill may be used to increase the speed for a short time after the ability is activated, or to increase the range of the ability to jump. Additional info: since the charge is electric, range is high and the target bounce is instant. When paired with other deadly robots, it can help clear a small group of enemies. However, physical shields deflect the ability due to the fact that it's made of pure energy. It's imagined to be as small as a phantom, thereby justifying this speed and making it the smallest four-legged robot in the game. So, response from the developers. When they saw the robot's name, which was the hacker, they thought it would hack the enemy robot and assume control. And they said that would be a robot horror show. And it's good to know that it wasn't the concept. The hacker is basically a nice concept of a jumping disabler. However, 2 of its features are breaking their design rules. First off, just as with the Blackout concept, we are making a game and we can't take away the ability to play it. So hacker breaks this rule by disabling too many features for other players, including the sights. Secondly, we don't overload a content unit with too many mechanics. And this is where, yes, they repent, because they have broken that rule before when working on the Scorpion. They said they all do it sometimes, but in the ideal case, the robot should only get those mechanics that emphasize its gameplay, and they shouldn't remove the rest. We could remove some of the hacker's features without making it lose its identity. And finally, the last one we have is called the Prometheus. Excuse me again. And I have a little trophy here because in the Discord server, people got to vote on what they thought was the best concept. And this was the one that was chosen by those in the Discord discussion. So its stats at level 1 was 150,000 health, shield health of 25,000 per shield, and 35 kilometers per hour. So the Prometheus is a bipedal 2-legged robot with 4 medium weapons and 3 built-in physical shields. 1 on each shoulder of the robot, and a larger one coming up from the lower torso of the robot. So think that it's actually coming up from below to come upwards. Most of the other shields come from side to side. It's coming from down to up. The 3 shields meet in the center of the robot's torso. This robot is physically built like the Leech, but with some differences. The Prometheus is close to mid-range brawler tank. He can be used to capture and lock down hardpoints on the map, such as the middle or side beacons, by rushing in and sacrificing his first life. And keep that in mind, first life. So Prometheus has more than 1 life. To gain temporary invincibility and the other stats boost listed in his ability description. He is better at taking large groups of enemy robots because of his unique ability. And the active ability, the Prometheus gains 20% speed boost, 15% defense for 3 seconds, and it has 2 charges. Now this is the interesting thing. It has a passive ability, which is called Unkillable. This ability activates upon death. After Prometheus is killed, he is resurrected with half of its original health, a speed boost of 20%, a last stand type invincibility that lasts for 10 seconds, and a damage boost of 25%. All of the stats buff lasts until the Prometheus is killed a second time. So the Prometheus has to be killed 2 times before it's completely dead. Note this ability can only be used 1 time and is triggered upon death instead of by the player. That's why it's passive. The Prometheus relies heavily on its ability, so after the ability has been activated, it leaves Prometheus in a more vulnerable state and therefore easier to kill. Fighting Prometheus from cover would be optimal because that would allow you to hide when necessary. So, the response from the devs. It's an intriguing concept of a Phoenix robot, intriguing and dangerous. Hangar is one of the key aspects of the game. You can have up to 5 robots and 1 Titan in your hangar, and challenging battles will usually require you to use every one of them. An unkillable tank robot inherently lasts for too long and removes the need to deploy other robots in your hangar. In addition, this robot would have a tremendous advantage in one-on-one situations. Imagine you're trying to destroy Fenrir, and when you win so narrowly, Fenrir returns to the fight with half of its HP restored and finishes your already battered robot off. So that comment there is not saying that the Fenrir will come back. It's just using the Fenrir as an example. If the Fenrir had the Prometheus abilities, because it's a tank and it was so hard to kill, once you've killed it, it then spawns back and you're dead, because the Fenrir, even though it has reduced stats, would have an unkillable, be completely invulnerable. So they say they're afraid that Prometheus will be invincible in one-on-one situations, and that was a sort of a deal breaker. On the other hand, the, quote, second life of the robot can always be designed to be a portion of its overall power. In theory, each robot has a limited pool of power. We can use most of this pool to give the robot a lot of HP, leaving it with one light slot and removing its ability. Such robot would fit in the game's ecosystem balance-wise, but it would be boring to run. It's a radical example, of course, but they hope to illustrate the idea of this power pool. To make the Prometheus less ruinous, they could try adding more penalties to the invincibility. For example, the robot could terminate automatically after a certain number of seconds from being killed for the first time. Or if the stats are not too high in the first place, the robot could lose its ability, shields, and most of the cannons before it returns to the fight. So there are some options that they have to possibly balance this robot out. So that was all of the concepts that were added. And we're already at 35 minutes in, but let's get into the Q&A portion because I promised it. So, looking at the questions and answers. Question: what program do you use to make the robots and rig them? Response was, the software, it's mostly called Unity. Game designers assemble the robots in scenes in Unity. It's the engine of the game. But before they have stuff to assemble, they work with the art department to develop the models. The models are usually created in Maya. And of course, there's a lot of coding, and the coding comes separately. Will there be a Spanish bot? Someday. Personally, I like creating robots, which are, and they spell which wrong, which are inspired by our world cultures. Any news on nerfing the plasma weapon range? And I think this has come from the complaints from the Ao Ming. In response, no, they don't have any plans on nerfing plasma weapons in the nearest future. Second page here. Any new Titans in mind? About the new Titans, we have one in work already. For now, it only is in the documentation stage, but they think they'll be ready to present it by the end of the year. What kind of Titan? I would like to post spoilers, so I'll try to give you a clue. The new Titan will play special forces, sabotage, and stuff like that. So to me, that's talking a little bit more of like a Scorpion type where you might be able to teleport. I don't know, this is just me guessing right now, they didn't mention it. But in one of the past dev streams, they did say something about a teleporting Titan at one point. Next question. Will there be a Heavy Mercury or a Titan Mercury? And the answer is, you kind of have the answer already. The Titans, Special Forces, Saboteurs. We can't disclose details now, but you will see where it goes. Next question. Except the huge graphic changes in the remastered War Robots, is there anything major changes in the game's code? The remastered War Robots is a huge overhaul. There will be changes in the game code. Not every aspect of the game will be affected, though. Are there going to be any suppression Titans? And they basically essentially answers here, well, there's the Nodens and it suppresses. Next question. Any new robots coming up for the cost of silver? And they basically said, no, there's no need for silver, as silver bots are used to essentially train newer players. Next question. Can war robots create a storyline for all the robots? And apparently they saw several questions about the storyline and the player versus environment campaign. Officially, they haven't heard of such plans. However, Eric, which was the designer, wouldn't say something like this in the comments section for no reason. But there was another issue, is that they haven't taught their servers to interact with the three parties, which we had already mentioned when we're looking at one of the robots. But they did say that keyword here is still. Next question. Nodon's disposal ability seems very weak. It was strong on the test server at first and needed a nerf, the reload in particular. But now it's so weak it doesn't even seem like a Titan ability. And their answer is our buff and nerf machine works like this. And this is where I have a huge problem, and it detailed in black and white what the problem with this game is. They release content. They gather statistics, average damage, average lifetime, etc. And it's really rough statistics. If there is no major statistic discrepancy, if there is a major discrepancy, they hotfix it. If everything is fine, they continue to collect data for 3 to 5 months. After it, they will decide if it needs some balancing love. And this is bull. It does not take you 3 to 5 months to determine a data point. There's been many times where you've released things such as the cryogenic weapons, such as the Nucleon, such as the Quarker, where you've buffed them within weeks of being released. And yet when there are issues, blatant issues in the game of completely overpowered items, you wait 3 months, if they say. I've never seen anything being nerfed after 3 months. But 5 months, 6 months, a year. Look at the lockdown weapons. They became so dominant. It took them a year before they addressed it. Look at the Al Mings, which has been live since November, which is beyond that 5-month threshold, and they still haven't addressed it. They currently here is saying that the Nodens is still waiting in its 3 to 5 months time frame. So for now, he is in balance, and they don't need the buff. And that's just directed to the Nodens, but there's many other items in this game that clearly need addressing, and they do not adhere to their own rule of 3 to 5 months. Now, getting back to the Nodens, I actually do agree with the person making this question that it does seem very weak, and I will talk briefly about its suppression ability. So the Nodens suppression ability right now is when you suppress an enemy, you suppress them for 50% of its damage. But you look at the Invader, which in this in comparison to all other regular robots, the Invader suppresses 66%. The Raker suppresses 75%. The Cerberus suppresses 50%. The Blitz suppresses 75%. And the Nightingale suppresses 70%. So why are regular robots suppressing other bots and Titans more than a Titan that has a suppress ability? To me, a Titan's ability should be suppressing for at least as much, if not more, than a regular robot that has suppression. That's just my own personal opinion. Next questions. What are the stages that robot or Titans go through? So essentially they're saying it takes about 3 months to complete a robot. I won't read through this entire thing. If you want to read it, you can just pause it right here and read it through. The next question, will the bad gold robots now that are essentially not worth it be available for silver? So they're talking the Raijin, the Carnage, and the Rhino. And they mentioned here that gold robots is supposed to be part of the evolution of the gameplay. So you start with silver, you learn how the core mechanics of the game works, then you transition to gold robots, where they're not meta, but they kind of get you ready for the meta, because some of them have some abilities. And then you transition over into the more meta bots. Next question, will there be Titans for all sets of robots? So Titans follow the same thing as the other three. So for example, will there be a suppression set? Will there be a Pantheon set, a Ragnarok, etc.? And their answer is it is not a rule, but it is quite possible future of Titans. Next question was, why are you not allowed to repair this is a very, even though it's a really short question, it was not worded very properly. So they're asking, why are you not fixing the legs on the servers? When I first read that, I thought they were saying, well, why can you not repair your legs of robots? But that was not the question. The question was specifically about legs on the server. And they answered they are trying, and they are making some progress, but game development and server part is kind of tricky. Next question, I don't know if anyone had played the game Warframe or watched the anime Neon Genesis, Evangelion, which the robot's inner structure is comprised of living flesh. And their answer is it sounds like a cool concept, and wondering if war robots would make a robot using a concept like this. And the developers are actually kind of a big fan of Warframe. But as for flesh robots, this style is hard to combine with the current style and lore of war robots. There's another 4 pages here, guys, so sorry about it. Next question. They were pretty curious about how the Raker got its name. So essentially, it's just a combination here. The Rainer, Raster, Raker, Raybeam, Rayzoid. The translation from Russian is Ray and robot's ability to shoot ray gun. So, and also the fun fact, the Raker's first name was actually the Leech. And the question is about, next one's about Retaliator and Vengeance, that they keep missing robots at short range. And the answer is, the Titan's inability to attack targets at point blank range was actually intended. It works as a counterplay of sorts. Titans are physically too high and massive to be able to shoot a Cossack sprawling at their feet. What if a Scorpion teleports at you and you have an Ares? What should you do? And the smart-ass comment was pray. And they said, well, just joking. Rely on your teammates. Try to be close to 1 or 2 of your friends and use power of your friendship. If it's an FFA, use a jump unit or phase shift. Next slide here. Why do not give all bots 3 passive modules? Is there any reason for this exception? That to make it sure lower tier robots never have the ability to compete with higher tier robots? The answer is mainly because of us fearing to make the game too complicated for novices. But it is not carved in stone. Someday they may rethink this decision. When will the Quarker be in store? They say, can't say now, but there will be a Quarker giveaways soon. Will the Blitz get a nerf, or will just the Clive? And for those of you who don't know, Clive is the legendary pilot for the Blitz. And the answer is there is no plans on nerfing the Blitz, and it fills their heart with joy. Will the Duck Squad ever be back? And for those who maybe don't realize, I believe it was one April Fool's, they had a skirmish where it was basically ducks running around with various weapons shooting each other. And their answer was they're being dominated now in the King of Hill game mode. And as some of you may know, the King of Hill is a dead mode in the game. Is Pixonic working on the pilot rework system, which is so damn costly? And they reported feedback to them so that they could see the analyzed data. And this really peeved me. There are no plans on bringing back the 50 gold skill swaps. We've noticed the feedback, but from the statistical point of view, this feature performs as intended. Sure, and it performs as intended as forcing players to buy gold with real money. And I'm sorry, Pixonic, if you haven't realized yet, many players are actually just not even bothering with pilots anymore. So if your intent is to kill your game and have people steer clear from pilots, well, you've certainly succeeded. I'm one of those players. I'm not investing anything in my pilots anymore because there's no point. I can't afford it. Next question. Why were robot packs of 3 changed? Many players were asking us to slow down on creating content. We agreed and decided for this year to check how just using 1 robot at a time would work. This robot would be essentially a pack of 1. It's always the best of. So in other words, it's always the best of the 3. For now, we are gathering this data for this experiment, so creating 3 robot packs is not possible in this current paradigm. Next section here. Why so many bot designs with 4 medium weapons? It's OP as bleep. And the ability on top makes it beyond broken. Inside our development team, we have our own classification systems for robots. There is one class called the Glass Cannon. This class robots are most dangerous because of their ability and their weapon slots, but they are very fragile and easy to kill when their ability is on cooldown. You can beat them, but you need to catch them in their fragile state. So this robot mainly gets 4 medium slots. Will new graphics update come soon? Of course. For now we test it. We will try to release it this year. Next question. It was mentioned that players are supposed to be able to progress to meta bots after getting gold ones. How is that going to happen if the meta changes every major update? Well, the meta is never homogeneous. Is always a pinnacle of meta, and there is the rest of the meta. And sometimes there are niches. Our meta usually consists of 7 to 8 bots. The pinnacle of meta is hard to get. The rest of meta is affordable. We monitor meta statistics constantly. If we notice a shift that makes the game boring, unbalanced, or too hard to new players, we adjust the meta. Finally, the last slide here. Will there be Special Edition Mercury? He is not in the plan for now, but now is not eternal. Fun fact, Mercury was the developer's first created bot. We have many types of effects. For example, damage over time. Will there be a new type of effect soon? Yes. So we knew there's going to be some kind of a new effect coming down the road. How do you plan to balance the French Ming? Either through nerfs or other changes of game mechanics. And their answer, which is exactly what they did with the Leech, wait for new gun packs for robots. It will give Ming some hard time, not a nerf, but a good start. So essentially they're going to be releasing some new weapons, specifically looking at to possibly counter the Ming, but it's not going to nerf the Ming. It's just going to be the start. So again, they don't really want to actually touch the Ming, and that's probably because a lot of players have spent real money. And if they nerf it, they'll get a lot more negativity towards them than they currently already are from us poor people who are suffering at the domination that Max Mings have on the field. Next question. Will you give platinum for slaying Titans? Like maybe 2 platinum? And for now, no. They're not planning on this. They're actually, from my understanding, they're not planning on giving us any more means of getting platinum than are currently already are in the game. And the final question. Why are Titans level... why were they kept at level 50 and not just reduced to something like 50 levels only? And their answer, just because. No. Because they're kidding. They wanted Titans to be something new, something big, and something for the long term. They calculated that level 150 will be best cap for their plans. And that may be true, but if you wanted something that was best for long term, then why did you make it available so that players could unlock it and level it up from day one? If you want to be long term, you should have been able to make it that people could not purchase platinum and everybody would have to play and level their Titans over time instead of paying for it up front. But no, they catered to the wallet warriors, and so they knew putting platinum out there that you couldn't get any other way, they would jump on it and level them, and these max Titans just have the way of the battlefield, getting 5, 6, 7. I think the record right now is 11 million, but I think that guy was using mainly invaders. But for Titans, yeah, it's just if you're running a max Titan, you'll have a bad game if you probably get under 4 million damage. Anyways, so that is the whole stream discussion summed up here. If you listen to it this far, congrats. It's a lot longer than I thought it, but there was a lot of information to cover. So anyways, if you happen to like this content, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and until next time, cause some mayhem in the field for me.